Actually, we're live now, so welcome. Yeah. Nina, Nance, great to have you both. Nance has been here for this whole marathon stream, and Nina, we're so grateful to have you on here, and it's wonderful that we finally get to do the thing that we tried to do last year when I did a marathon stream. And so yeah, welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. In London, it's raining very hard. The birds are still singing. All is well.
That's wonderful. I need to go outside and touch grass at some point here, because I feel like I'm getting a little screen fried. But we did take a break and do some stuff where I was able to just kind of focus on the whiteboard and like impromptu lecture talking about all kinds of things. But for the audience, I just want to say a couple of things that I kind of alluded to before we went to that PSA. So first of all, Nina Power is an intellectual. She has been around for a long time. And
That's really old.
Well, I mean, you don't look old, but you've been around since at least, you were like brushing shoulders with Nick Land and Mark Fisher back at Warwick University, back before I was a twinkle in my mom's eye, I think. Intellectually, I was not even thinking yet in a sort of sense. In fact, I think that you were teaching at a time that I still couldn't read. I was thinking about this. It's like, I am 36, but I didn't learn how to read until I was 12. And so like, I've just structurally speaking, I've always been kind of back a bit. And it was, that's because my parents prioritized pioneering over the homeschooling. It was a kind of a homesteading setup. And so I just didn't learn how to read. But you were doing all this amazing stuff with those people then. I got into your work, and I wanted to let everybody know about this. I got into your work because of this anthology that you had edited called Why Work, which is really important for both anti-work as well as what I would say is, more importantly, the critique of workerism, which centers the idea that the activities we engage in a job-centric society are the be-all, end-all. But in more recent years, you have become the subject of not just controversy, but so much controversy that this book became famous for no fucking reason at all. When Daniel Tutt shared a screenshot of the early edition of it, and people were saying things like, people who purchase this book should be barred from public life. And that's a direct quote from Twitter. Famous theory blogger person said, "These are the most dangerous thinkers on the internet. Engaging with them gives them credibility, so you are morally obligated to avoid this info hazard at all costs. Also, their graphic design is bad. They should have thought about that." It goes on and on. There's a bunch of these other ones. They're all really funny. So that's why we put them on the back of the book, because we didn't have any real reviews at that point. So, but
you couldn't ask for better publicity, to be honest.
No, we couldn't. And you made it all possible. And that wasn't even the plan, so thank you, I guess.
I didn't even see any of this. I'm presumably blocked by all of these people who are morally disapproving.
Like 260,000 people saw these tweets. And I don't know, it's probably about 100 people signal boosting it, about 100 people who surely have you blocked, So
amazing.
And of course, it wasn't all you. Let's be fair. There were some people who focused on Slavoj Žižek. He's a TERF. He's bad man. He made that article this year. Blah blah blah.
But that's because he published in Compact and he wrote about sex and gender. So in a way, that's also partly tangentially my fault as well. So just to embrace the hatred and the blame and.
Well, and so I would like to kind of, with that, hopefully having whetted people's appetites a little bit as to, okay, something's going on here, give you the floor and let you introduce yourself, what you've been up to, the kinds of intellectual projects you've been engaged in, etc.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dave. And just to say, I'm very pro your project in general, and I admire your verve and your commitment and your sort of I don't know, subjective desire for philosophy in this marathon-esque sort of way. It's like Herzogian in its sort of epic quality. Anyway, so and I'm excited to talk about at some point like the tour you might do and this kind of thing. So I think, and it's part of what I've been involved in for a few years now, which is, I guess, like the post-academic or para-academic world, particularly around ideas and philosophy. I think there are other figures like Justin Murphy and Michael Milliman and various projects like Parisia and the Melbourne School of Continental Philosophy. And, there's been a whole host of people trying to get out of the academy, or having been in it, leaving it, or having never been in it, but being dedicated to discussion. And it's certainly clear to me after 13 years of teaching at universities that the life is outside of those walls, and not through any fault of the students that I was teaching, who were lovely, but just because of this sort of increasing commercialization, the fact that people were borrowing so much money, they were in a state of anxiety. You can't really think or, just make mistakes, which is what you have to do when you're arguing in seminars, and people were becoming anxious about saying the wrong thing, and the institutions themselves were becoming more bureaucratic and centralized and so on. So I'm very, very critical of institutions, just as I'm critical of work as the measure of value. As you mentioned that book I wrote the preface for, which is largely kind of anarchist and autonomist or post-autonomous really approaches to work, which I came through largely through thinking about unpaid labor, as discussed in many of the Italian feminists and so on, people like Silvia Federici. And I was very interested in various anti-work ideas, or really how we think about ourselves in relation to questions of production, reproduction, and so on. I was into that mindset for about 5 years, I think, and then I kind of moved on to thinking about men and masculinity. It does follow from my work on feminism, which, like, I had this short pamphlet out in 2004, I think, no, 2009, called One Dimensional Woman, which was very, very short book, not really even a book, I can't really dignify it, but it was part of this wave of bloggers at that time. And this is before social media as we know it now, right? Like, there was no Facebook, no Twitter, but people had these kind of theory blogs. Mark Fisher was the sovereign blogger of this period, and everybody kind of wanted to emulate Mark. And he was very encouraging to people, either that he knew or didn't know, in fact, so he was very enthusiastic, and he encouraged a lot of people to write and to experiment with thinking online. And he was really the master of this kind of making ideas kind of vibrant and vital, and taking philosophy out of its sort of potentially stuffy, analytic kind of sherry drinking image, particularly in Britain, and linking it to kind of music and cinema. And he was just kind of excellent at this. And yeah, I mean, I was at Warwick in the 90s. I am obviously significantly older than you, but when I went to Warwick in 97, I was 18, and the people who I was talking to, including Mark, were kind of a lot older. I mean, significantly older. They were postgrads. I didn't really know what to expect, and I just came across this kind of crowd of amazing people, and they had been taught by Sadie Plant and Nick Land and Keith Ansell Pearson and Stephen Holgate, and there was a lot of kind of foment and kind of craziness, and I mean, to be honest, lots of drinking and drugs, and but it was all sort of directed towards this kind of experiment in thinking. And they had various conferences before I got there, like in the 93, 94, that were kind of called Virtual Futures, that were around thinking about what was going to come in terms of technology and the internet. And it was really pioneering, cutting edge stuff around post-humanism, transhumanism, as was. I mean, I'm very critical of some of those perspectives now, but there was, at that moment, I think, a real utopian dimension to imagining what the future would hold. And that was really what was at stake. And people were largely working on kind of Spinoza, Deleuze, Foucault, and kind of cyberspace. And I don't think cyberspace quite went down how people thought it might, but we have elements of it. And I think there's something kind of but I'm very influenced by Illich, so I am kind of techno-critical. But I think even Illich is dialectical on this point. And by the way, what he says about reading is very beautiful in relation to what you said. His final work is, maybe you know it, but like where he looks at writing as like one of the first technologies in a way, and he's actually extremely thoughtfully critical about writing as a technical practice because of what we lose, and obviously we also have that in Plato, the kind of tragic loss really of the dialogue, and the impersonness, and that perhaps the Greeks invented tragedy in order to cope with the invention of writing, because suddenly you can hear voices where there are none, and it induces a kind of cultural schizophrenia. It's a very beautiful argument by Walter Ong and others. So that that every technology, of course, brings with it promise and use, but also loss, right? And the Greeks knew this, and we should always, I think dialectically as we do about technology, but to always be on our guard from an Illichian point of view, to not become the tool of the tool, as he says, like the tool must be convivial above all, like it must contribute to human ends. And obviously the internet is a very double-edged sword, or maybe it's like an infinitely edged sword, really. So but here we are, and I think we have to recognize that a lot of these connections wouldn't be possible without like things we're doing now. And I taught like these courses all the way through lockdown, and it really was lifeline, or like this point of connection. There's a kind of sadness about sort of getting to know people that you'll probably never meet, like people I spoke to in remote parts of Australia who did like a 12-week course with me on angels or whatever, and you never get to see how tall they are. There's this like sense of loss. It's very poetic, but sometimes you meet people, sometimes they come through, and then you're like, oh, hang out with me. So anyway, what am I doing? Right, so I did all this project on men, and because there had been this kind of strange turn in the culture that seemed to be, on the face of it, demonizing men, and this was not really a very socialist or left-wing perspective from my point of view, right? And I, whatever phrases we use are a bit complicated, but being on the old left, or whatever we want to say, like there was a kind of almost sort of Christian values of I don't know how to put it, like forgiveness and flexibility, and a recognition that people would make mistakes, and a kind of compassion, and this sort of hardened into something much stranger that kind of went along with the rise of a certain kind of social media and all the other possibilities for mobbing at a distance and cancelling and all this. That's kind of a boring discussion in some ways, but we have to recognize again, like the capacities and the tendencies of these technologies, or what they can be used for. Like suddenly everyone can email your boss or whatever. This is everyone is part of this acephalic Stasi monitoring, recording machine, and we have to think carefully about our own role. And there's a very interesting interview with Stephen Elliott, who was somebody who was Me Too. There was a kind of men in media list. I can't remember. A woman set it up during the early days of Me Too, and it was basically like a shared Google spreadsheet where anyone could add any man's name with any accusation. Of course, this is open to serious abuse, so people were making all kinds of claims about various men and naming them, and it was public document. And one guy sued the woman who set it up and won the case, or they settled only about a year or two ago. But one of the interesting things that Stephen Elliott, and he's a novelist, writes about his experience was the fact that people forget that they've been part of a mob. And this really interests me, that we're all capable, like we've all been involved in ostracizing somebody or ignoring people or whatever. It's not that there are like these saintly people who never cancel anyone, and then there are these bad people. Of course, they would sit the other way around, but it's that we have all participated to some degree in the social punishment of others, and we have to recognize our own complicity and our own capacity to do that, and we have done that. And I think so he makes this very interesting point that there's almost like this structural need to forget that one participated in a mob, however virtually. And I think the virtual aspect, of course, makes it easier to do in some ways because, you know, it's at a distance and you know, it might have real world ramifications for whoever you're going after, but you don't need to think about it in the same way as if you were in a village and you'd all decided to like cast someone out and, you know, that kind of thing. But it's the same pattern. So
it is.
Go on.
Oh, I just said it is. But I was gonna also ask, and I guess this is a good little point to maybe add a little direction before, you know, turning it back to you. And that is, so folks, at the end of the day, talking about what men want, what is a woman, or saying that you fundamentally disagree with or have issues with some of the major tendencies of activism today, especially if it is trans activism, is the rock against which most ships will break. You do not tread there. You should be very, very careful. You should be careful people say, well, I don't really know very much about that, and I'm just going to kind of go the other way. And you're not allowed to say the common sense thing, which of course for the left, well, you're fucked then, because if you can't say the common sense thing, then normal people are obviously going to distrust you. And so part of the conversation I'd like to be able to have here is on why it's important to talk to conservatives. And I think that conversation comes out of why it's important to include their voices. And then that conversation comes out of the work you're doing with Compact. And or at least it can. You know, I ultimately want to set you up to be able to say a few things about Compact. But I know you're also talking about art right now and stuff like that. Or sorry, no, that was a slip. That's also another thing I was hoping that you would talk about, because it's also something you've been canceled for, is art shows that showed flags that had like all of the world's flags, but there happened to be, it's like all of history's flags were in the room, and then people were fixating on the fact that some of those were bad flags or whatever.
I mean, it wasn't even my show. I mean, they asked me to write the essay, but I was not involved. It was these artists, you know, and they should be respected for the fact that it was their show and their idea, you know what I mean? Like, and people were associating it with me, and it's like, it wasn't my idea. And I mean that in the sense that the artist should get the recognition for what was an very interesting idea. And they weren't flags exactly. They were painted. I've forgotten about this whole affair, but yes, I'm basically cancelled in New Zealand at least twice. Once for this show. And the artist actually had to go into hiding at one point. I mean, it was kind of crazy. I mean, the New Zealand sounds like it's gone completely demented, but they were painted flags. So they weren't the flags, if you see what I mean. They were representations of the flag. Okay, you could say a flag is also a representation. But I think it's important that they were, you know, postcard-sized paintings of the flags, right? This is part of the show. And indeed, they had, you know, flags from all over the world, and including the Confederate flag, the Nazi flag, you know, flags from all over the country, flags from imaginary places, and so on. And it was very thoughtful and really raised all these questions about belonging and representation and you know, everything you'd want an art show to do, actually, or you'd hope it would do. It's not just bashing you over the head with some story or some message that you're supposed to like, you know, accept and feel bad about. You know, you could feel bad looking at flags too, but that's another story. And I wrote this very banal short essay about flags and, you know, these things. And yeah, I mean, I have some really, really obsessive stalkers, and they can do a lot of damage by basically, if you know, and some of them don't have to work for a living because they're independently wealthy, so they can sit at home and just like fire off, you know, emails and make up fake grassroots campaigns and, you know, all this stuff. And it's very weird, you know.
Well, I remember I was bringing on somebody for one of the interviews, and he asked us beforehand about you because he's like, so what's the deal with Nina? Because someone's trying to get me to sign something. And I think I told you about it when it happened. I was like, hey, just so you know. And you're like, I know. But this to me feels like one of the problems with getting any scale in terms of reach or visibility in the world today, like any degree of scale or visibility, if you you basically open yourself up to insanely obsessive stalkers. But then if you speak on anything that you're not supposed to, well, then that compounds it. And then if you actually care about truth, and you've said that you care more about truth and understanding than, the concept of justice itself, which means nothing outside of truth, then I think it's just going to compound even more. And so, it's,
I think go back to this, you mentioned this idea of conservatism. I just wanted to maybe talk about that. I mean, I think we need to be precise. I mean, I don't regard myself as a conservative. I'm not quite sure what that really means. I mean, I don't know if it's ever actually been tried. I mean, Edmund Burke is a kind of conservative, and often people understand it as liberalism slightly slowed down, with the brakes on, but not opposed to ultimately the same kind of processes. And I mean, in reality, Margaret Thatcher was a Tory, but she imposed this extraordinary, revolution, if you like, a kind of capitalist revolution and the destruction of industry. And, so really, I mean, in terms of creative destruction, there was nothing conservative about what she was doing in the sense of a preservationism, right? You'd think a conservative would want to conserve, not let the market loose and smash up human life and destroy towns and cities, which is what actually happened. I would say that I hold many of the same positions that I did when I was 15, which is to say I'm anti-war, I'm a feminist, I believe in redistribution, and I'm basically a kind of de facto humanist. I think that human beings are wonderful, but also flawed, and that goes for all of us. I think we have to negotiate. I think that we should be wary of people who demand whatever it is they want without listening to other people. And, we can talk about various pathologies that maybe have been encouraged by the internet. And I think a lot of institutions now are kind of dominated by a particular kind of person who is not prepared to negotiate. And then you're kind of being held hostage by so I don't know, sort of conceptual terrorists or something, unless you agree with me, you're not going to be part of this thing. And so I wouldn't describe myself as a conservative, and I don't think Compact is a conservative project either. I think what we're doing is trying to establish a place for disagreement, and somewhere in the middle, I hesitate to say the center, but because actually we're publishing people from across the spectrum. Just in the past 2 days, we published Alan Dershowitz defending Israel really badly, and then we published Musa Al-Gharbi talking about what's really going on, right? So, I think there's something kind of very provocative, potentially dangerous about doing things like that. But what we're trying to do is say, look, there are these different positions in the world. You can't simply block them out or block people and pretend that people don't have good reasons for their positions. They might be bad reasons, but they have reasons. And I think what we've seen on, I don't know what to call it, but in recent years is this kind of just complete intolerance for viewpoint diversity, which is ironic given the emphasis on diversity, but it's diversity at the level of representation and identity. And if you read people like Foucault and Deleuze properly, this is exactly what they were trying to get away from. The idea of being pinned down and locked into identity. These are philosophies of becoming, not of static, bureaucratic, sort of names, which always come from outside and always limit. And so there's something very bizarre about this shift. And so I don't know, I mean, I'm a philosopher, I'm interested in dialogue and disagreement. I think this is the natural state of humanity. And when it comes to politics, and I'm not a politician, but I think politics is the art of negotiation. It cannot be the art of simple domination, right? Otherwise we're going to be at the mercy of a very small number of very crazy people who are very highly motivated.
Right, and this is why we led off the Theory Underground courses with a course on the idea of university, based in the book by the same title by Karl Jaspers, as well as a course on the professional managerial class, consciousness and ideology, where I represented basically a post-left position. I say basically because it's more complicated than that, but Elton, the co-instructor for that course, he he is a DSA leftist. And so, but the reason that these two courses go together, Nance was one of the few people there for both of those courses, is because the idea of the university is the idea of a variety of viewpoints working towards the truth, being in a dialogue with one another, trying to approximate the universal, but coming from particularity, working through the particularity of specific fields, your own standpoint within those fields. And so obviously there's been a genocide of voice. And so we talk a lot about what you're calling conceptual terrorism. I call it epistemological gaslighting and social blackmail, right? So epistemological gaslighting is when you tell somebody that something is true and they just need to toe the line. When there is no expectation of you can sort that out on your own, you can figure it out for yourself. And so the social blackmail part is like, well, it's why they make an example of you. Mm-hmm. Right.
No, for sure. And I think that's right. I mean, it's to scare other people and to say this will happen to you, right? Like, it's like, you will lose friends and possibly work, and, people will hate you, and they'll make up whatever they want about you because you've been, you've got a little cross on you now, and people can then like unleash their sort of resentments, whether they're actually about you or not. It doesn't matter, like, because you're like, this is the thing. My next work, I'm really interested in these questions of evil and hatred. Like, it's going to be a very dark year, but I'm very happy about it. And because I'm very interested in this move, which is the one that says, you're allowed to hate these people because they hate, right? Mm-hmm. So that's it. So the idea would be that I hate trans people, right? Of course, I don't hate trans people. I don't hate anybody. I mean, there are certain things I don't like. I don't think I possess more hatred than other people. I think hate is a necessary feature of certainly childhood development. Freud makes this very clear. Hate comes before love. It's absolutely imperative for children to have to take up distance against the world and against their parents and so on, right? So, we need hate. There's huge confusion at the moment about this word. Maybe there always is. It's very dangerous hate speech laws coming in Ireland and other places, or attempting to, which would criminalize, for example, the statement of facts, and talk about what a fact is, but let's say truth claims, if they offend subjectively, right? So if you remove the objective measure for hate, that's complicated enough, but if you make everything a matter of offense, and you turn even truthful statements into hateful statements, and I think, then this is pretty bleak, right? And we've already seen people being arrested for making statements which are correct. We've also seen people being arrested for praying outside of abortion clinics and so on. And I think, we have to defend things like freedom of conscience. I think it's very important. It's often overlooked when people talk about free speech and freedom of association, right to protest. And I was very involved in campaigns defending the right to protest and all of these great liberal values, which, by the way, Marx is not opposed to. We have to be clear that whilst Marx is criticizing, the bourgeois cover stories, right, in terms of liberal rights, he is nevertheless also defending the freedom of the press, for example. He begins by talking about this. So there are a number of left-wing defenses of free speech. The fact that the left let this term and this phrase be taken up by the right is a terrible idea. I did try to say, as many people did, that this would come back to bite them in the ass. The moment any government or any culture says, actually, you can't defend communism either, because communism is about mass murder and we're going to stop you from talking about Marx. Or, as we see with the Israel-Palestine discussion, we now see the exact same people who are calling for no platforming and cancelling of people over Brexit or sex and gender or whatever, are now saying that they're being cancelled for defending Palestine, and they don't like it, and of course they don't. And I see literally some of the same people, the exact same people who try to lose me work, who try to get me cancelled from conferences, who refuse to speak on panels with me, and so on and so forth, making videos and writing articles defending free speech. And it's like, I defend your free speech, lady or man, but you can defend mine. But I think we should be gracious. I don't want to get into these resentful back and forths, right? And this like the book on men was partly of this. It was like trying to say, how do we have a non-resentful relation between the sexes? And I can't get over sexual difference. You know what I mean? It's like I do think there are two sexes. I'm entitled to this belief. I believe that I am a woman. I believe that human beings can't change sex. I think that a lot of things follow from this, and it's nothing against people who want to dress and act in a certain way or whatever. It's just that we have a different conceptual paradigm. It doesn't mean that I hate people who hold a different belief. They hate me, but I don't hate them.
Well, even then, I would expect they don't all hate you. Like, there's got to be some people who are like indifferent, or who. And I was touching on this earlier. We were talking about how there was the queerification of cyberspace, and everything was playing with identities, and then in the last 10 years, it's become about fixing those identities and saying, no, it's literally true. And if you don't believe me, then fuck you. You're a Nazi. And like this whole thing that's just like, whoo, I thought it was a game. I thought we were all playing here. And now some people just got really serious. And now they have the force of law behind them. We've got Biden sitting here clapping along. And it's like, this is no longer some like radical experimental free play thing like I thought it was when I did genderqueer stuff back in the day. It's like, no, we're talking about something else. And I see it as sort of an avenue towards a terrible kind of neo-feudalism, but even worse, towards what I take to be the real struggles of the next couple of 100 years. And so I get into this with my piece that opens the coming volume called Human Futures at Theory Underground. And this volume is one that's going to develop out of the conference that happens in Portugal at the end of May. But you're, of course, invited to that. But it will also be happening at the conference that will be happening in October in Boise. And the Human Futures ultimately stems out of the debate between Žižek and Nick Land, which we've been instigating, and we want to see it happen. Žižek is down. He said that he's down to do it with us, sometime in February. We're hoping to be able to get a hold of Land. He's not responded or anything, but we also just want to interview him because he opens a whole can of worms that have to be sorted through if we're actually serious about thinking about the future. And the struggle of the next couple hundred years, I mean, really, it could go on for thousands of years, is the struggle between saying that the real, insofar as there is something real outside of, the symbolic imaginary reality that we kind of take for granted, there's something of value in nature. Well, let's just say that for now. Versus a kind that says the only thing of value is sort of negating that and becoming our own thing and freeing ourselves from that. So it's, freeing ourselves from nature versus, I don't want to say just back to nature, but there is this, because there will always be this sort of, it's the granola back to nature people versus the transhumanist cyborg people. And of course, you get people like Daguerre's talking about how it's going to be the cosmists versus the Terrans, and the Terrans will be the people who want to stay on Earth, who want to preserve Earth, and the cosmists will be the people who want to create gods out of what technology, ultimately, the singularity, etc. But outside of the ideology and the really big picture of like, which side do you take? For me, I'm saying that the civil rights struggle of the next 200 to 1,000 years comes down to, are you allowed to say that you see some truth on both sides of that debate? Because if you're not allowed to say that, then the Civil War is going to be a lot worse than it has to be,
Sure. I mean, I think one way of synthesizing this dialectically would be to say, like, it's in our nature to try to escape our nature, or,
for sure.
to kind of, like we are part of nature. I mean, we are nature, right? Like we are unavoidably animal to some degree. We are embodied. We are not uploaded to the cloud. We are not, we're not avatars. We have flesh. We have feelings. We die. I mean, these are not yet transcended. We haven't transcended things like, childbirth. Every single human being at this point is still born of a woman. these are sort of, I get the Promethean, technophilia, the fantasy of escape, the desire to leave Earth, but like we've barely sort of begun to understand, and I think there is this kind of maybe an absence of a poetic relation to nature or to ourselves that we overlook, or we, in our rush, in our haste to get to something new, and often these new things are very destructive and create far more suffering than the acceptance of a certain limitation or a series of limitations, right? That doesn't mean that one can't think or speculate. On the contrary, I think it's by accepting our limitations that we are allowed then to think beyond them. But it doesn't mean that we should sort of, start like biohacking or imagining a world without bodies, and as well, we can imagine them, but to not try to sort of create that, force that somehow. It's not, there is no, I don't know, I mean, this discussion or this tension reasserts itself over and over and over again, whether we're talking about the Romantics, the Enlightenment, it's kind of inescapable, and every genre of thought, feminism included, has this tension too. I mean, there are actually very few techno-feminists really, but people can take up the Firestone position. You have the xenofeminists doing something like this, and trying to tie the kind of transgenderism to transhumanism, and to try to think about a post-family, post-birth world, and so on. The idea of reproductive technology solving the natural condition of humanity. But I suppose I just, the older I get, I think, no, that's what's good about us. We're not Chat GPT, and that stuff just produces like 2 level essay garbage and nonsense and just like really boring stuff. Like, what's interesting about us is our flawed, messed up combination of flesh and mind, like between animals and angels, and the fact that this can generate all kinds of relations and the question of ethics and so on. And the rationalist attempt to solve problems, like, what if they're not problems in the first place? I'm
realizing our time constraints, and what I would like to do in the last...
I'm like whittering on.
No, you're doing great. This is exactly, I'm succeeding if I can get you talking, but I guess, so I've kind of given you like this rough outline of kind of like the real concern for me, because I see this current, the vehemence around this activism as the just like it's a foreshadowing of something that's only going to get worse. Because like right now, like for instance, it's not very common for there to be problems in schools because a child wants to be a cat or a dog, and they meow or they bark, and they like to eat out of a bowl, and then the parents are upset because the school will not affirm their animal identity. But though it's not common, it has already happened. And so I know somebody who this happened in Colorado, and then I know someone else who knows like this happened in the city he lives in Australia. And so the fact that happened in those two places, obviously we can blame the internet, whatever. There's a lot of ways of talking about how TikTok's influence on all of this, but for me, it's like, okay, how far will this actually go before people kind of realize, okay, like there's an interesting thing here with parents and the responsibility of teachers, and these two very different kinds of responsibility versus like the freedom to be able to create ourselves or to denature ourselves and to be able to take on all these kinds of self-actualization projects that only become increasingly possible with these kinds of genetic modification technologies that we have, to where it's not unlikely that in our lifetimes, like my own fucking kids probably could have come home and be like, Dad, I'm getting a tail, I don't care. And I'm going to be like, oh my God, you're getting a tail? And I'll be like, can you wait until you're 21? And then they'll be like, fuck you, and then run away from home. And I'm like, God damn it. Or my school will like then arrest me for not kind of affirming the child's desire to get a tail. And the thing is a tail wouldn't actually castrate you for life, right? And so that's where, for me, it's like with everything when it comes to this whole conversation, it's like I'm all for critiquing gender and sex and like let's do it all day, but where it grounds out in prisons, sports, and children is where the problems get complicated, and the people who want to act like it's not complicated and this is just a right-wing boogeyman, I think that they are out of touch. And by the way, I don't think Compact's conservative or that you're conservative, but I think that it's important to talk to them and to allow them to speak. And the reason that I even use that as like an avenue into this conversation is because if we define progress as identity affirmation, kind of taking like this sort of like pro-felicity view on identity, if that is progress and everything else is conservative, and well, then it becomes very important to maintain conversations with people who are being called conservative in this new environment that we're in. So.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. And like, you know, my position on this is like talk to anybody and everybody, basically. And I think the only way to understand why someone holds the positions that they do is to talk to them. And if your mission is to change people's minds or to give a better explanation, then you have to do that through dialogue. I mean, you can just sort of block people and write them off, but this isn't going to help you any, like, even outside of politics. This is just going to like create, you know, self-isolating chambers and, you know, whatever. So I don't know. I mean, on the kind of the tail front, I think, yeah, I mean, what we've lost perhaps is this idea of play and becoming that we mentioned before, like the idea of like that there's a kind of transience in freedom in this, like not being pinned down, which has been replaced by, often fanatical insistence on a particular identity and the social demand that everybody recognize this identity, right? Which is, you know, has various kind of authoritarian aspects, and I think a lot of what's going on is that people's desire to be good, to be compassionate, to seem open-minded is being kind of hijacked, and in order to be seen as like a nice person or a good person, and it's very difficult to not be seen like that. Like, I don't like being hated. Like, it's not very nice. Like, the reason why people don't want to be cancelled is because it's very unpleasant in some ways. Like, you can get used to it, and you have other motivations, like a commitment to the truth, or you know, an attempt to try to describe reality, or the desire to think for yourself and not be bound by a kind of social conformism, especially when you think that social conformism is insane. You know, and in a way that is its own reward, because that's, I don't know, I couldn't live with myself. And let's be clear, I haven't said that much about this issue. It's not even my main thing. Like, of course I'm interested in sexual difference psychoanalytically and so on, and feminism, but for all of the stuff I've said, it's actually like a couple of articles, maybe 3, and a couple of comments, and you know, that's it. But whatever, it doesn't matter. The tail thing, what do we say about this? I think it's this is part of a bigger collapse of, or maybe like the end game of a certain kind of liberal individualism. Like, this is what we're looking at. I think what the post-liberals and like maybe compactors in this area are doing are trying to diagnose liberalism, which would include both left and right variants, would include leftism, also include conservatism. These are both kinds of liberalism. And basically trying to say, like, what comes after this, right? How do we avoid forms of neo-feudalism or techno-feudalism or whatever? How do we stop populism, which obviously has a huge appeal, from being not on the side of the workers, but rather being kind of just demagoguery, or just, you know, something, you know, potentially dangerous, potentially bad? Well, you have to speak with people who are populist. You have to understand why these figures are increasingly prevalent across South America, also in Europe with, Geert Wilders and Millet. And of course, they're different types of populists, Trump, of course. But we have to understand why people find these men, largely men, appealing. Not only you have Meloni as well, but you know what I mean? So what is going on here? Like, the left is losing a kind of battle, and you could say it's sort of doubling down on particular issues, but really these issues are kind of symptomatic of a collapse of things like, how to put it, even the hierarchy of parents and children. The idea that your parents know better than you. Like, if you want to talk about a kind of Rousseauianism, it's actually in this. It's the idea that there's a truth that children speak, and that children somehow know better than adults. Like, of course they bloody don't. They're children. You know what I mean? They need protecting from their own craziness. Like, adults should not be.
I don't even trust adults, but at some point we have to let them do their thing, so
somebody has to take responsibility. Like, basically we've had this kind of collapse of like the paternal function and its replacement by a kind of maternal function, but that's not sufficient actually to like, it can run bureaucracies and emphasize certain things like safety and this kind of misguided haywire compassion. But really, you do, at the end of the day, you need someone to say, like, the party's over, guys. Like, this is how it is. You need somebody, and this is the thing. It's like, do we want someone really authoritarian to come along and say, right, okay, I have an idea. Here's the order, right? Like, this is the order of things, right? And then no one gets to participate in it, and you just have to accept this, like, dictatorial order. Or do we have a kind of recognition of this collapse of the paternal function, and perhaps a return to something that is a negotiation and a recognition of equality within difference, and the fact that, actually you do need certain kinds of hierarchy, like parents and children. Like, this is a hierarchy. Not all hierarchies are bad. Maybe this makes me a terrible person for saying, but, without any kind of judgment and somebody saying enough. Basically you need someone to say no. Actually, this is what we're lacking. Nobody is saying no.
Right. Well, except that you're not allowed to talk about that. Right. So.
Well, we just did. I did.
Yeah. Well, and I guess with the last 5 minutes here, and I'm going to step away for a brief second. I'll still be able to hear over my headphones. But I wanted to sort of give Nance the floor here as our local conflicted cyborg person, and let him say some things. And I kind of want all of our closing thoughts to be, instead of like our positions on things, to be more like, I know that you're both more of this mindset anyway, thinking about how we would like to proceed with talking about this. And so when we come to London, the two of us will be meeting with you at Alfie's Pub, or potentially at the Portugal conference, as well as other stops on the tour that you are also welcome to come to. Any stop on the tour. If we were to do a panel kind of on this topic, like, how should it be framed? What would you like to talk about? What's something that you've been thinking about that you're interested in? And I guess we'll start with Nance as our resident cyborg person. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I think I'm not convinced either way, but I do think that our relationship with technology is somewhat constitutive of like our humanness, like our humanity itself. Like, I think language itself is a technology, and without language, we wouldn't be recognizably human. And so I just get skeptical when we talk about essentializing human nature. Of course, we need to be reasonable and we need to be measured. But I don't know. Like, I think maybe we should kind of cast it all away and just go bravely into the future. And I'm not convinced of that, but I think there's a tension there that I need to tarry with. Because I don't know what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm. Well, indeed. I mean, I think part of being human is this openness, right? Is the fact that our own, not to be too Heideggerian about it, but that our own being is in question for us, and the fact that we are tool-using beings is an essential part of our nature. And I don't think essential. People get very upset about essentialism, but you can have very open-ended essential descriptions. Like, to say something is not that, right? And to say it is this or it has these properties, I don't think it's to limit a thing, right? I think it's to try and understand a thing. And you know, when it comes to human nature, we could say, well, actually, like part of our nature is not knowing what our nature is, or, you know, experimenting with with matter, or do you know what I mean? And so I don't have a problem with essentialism, insofar as there's often just this immediate like horror, like, oh, you're trying to pin me down. You're trying to say, oh, all women must be mothers, or all men must act like sailors, or whatever. You know, no, like absolutely not. It's something. It's more fundamental than that. It's not about saying how people should act. You know, the capacity to act is not the moral imperative to act in a particular way. But it doesn't mean that there aren't real differences and real essences. And I don't think we should be afraid. But precisely if we define the human as the tool using animal, as the experimental animal, as all of these things, like, then that openness is just absolutely included. And, you know, the history of humanity collectively is the history of its, I don't know, self-experimentation. It's speculative thought, its desire to live on Mars, and so on and so forth. And I think actually you need to have a range of people. I think this is also important. I mean, for any future project, you actually do need people to say, well, what about this limit? And otherwise people are just going to like send themselves up into space and die because no one said, oh, well, did we think that we needed oxygen? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it can't just be like creative madness and throwing billions of pounds at ridiculous projects, because, well, it can be that, but it's, you know, in the future will very likely be sovereign billionaires versus techno managed masses, if we're not there already. And we have to think very cautiously about soma and addiction and technology and control, and the way in which, you know, people are being in fact held back from their own nature. And I think that the campaign against nature is actually a political one in some ways, right? To make people have a nihilistic view of what it is to be a human animal. So that would be my counterpoint to your position. But I'm not really in disagreement, but I'm saying we need both, right?
Yeah, I think we definitely need both for sure.
Mm.
And
I get to be the boring, hated one. You know, I'm like the sit down, children.
I like that you make so much discourse possible that wouldn't be taking place otherwise. I'm interested in your own personal project. I'm interested in your own thought, your thinking, as an intellectual. But I'm also the space that you help make for discourse in a world of genocide of voice, right? And these other academic escape artists you rattled off, like Justin Murphy and the Millerman School, and is it Hyclone or Hislion or?
Oh yeah. That's your. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what they're doing. I think that they're modeling something, and that ultimately I see myself as part of the same movement. And it's interesting, like they are different. Like Millerman versus Murphy is a debate I would love to host someday. But, you know, first I have to get to know them on individual terms. But Land versus Dugan is a battle that has to be thought through. And I disagree with both, but I also think that both of them have monopolized certain topics that are too dicey for most people to even broach. And it's like, we got to have these conversations, folks. So, you know, the fact that you see some hope in what they're doing, the fact that you're willing to publish Land and Žižek side by side, and that you've already been doing that, you know, for these last few years, I just hats off, appreciate it so much. And as far as like what we all actually think, because it's not what any of you actually think it is. It's some mysterious third thing. You won't know until the conference, or unless we have a conversation, hopefully sooner than that, in preparation for what we'll do then. And for now, we didn't even get to most of the stuff, but you know, it's been a pleasure having you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. And just to say, like, you know, I'm super committed to dialogue. I think it's one of the most enjoyable, if not the most enjoyable things to do. And like, we have to keep talking. I mean, if everybody thought and said the same thing, it would be an incredibly boring world, and it would be a very like, you know, totalitarian world as well. So like, I think we have to keep opening the space, you know, both lightheartedly and seriously, you know, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I enjoyed very much both what you said. So
thank you so much. All right. And with that, I'm about to roll the PSA that starts with Philip, who will hopefully be here later, saying that thinking is not cool. And I just wanted to say there is no such thing as thinking when there's a genocidal voice. So there we go.
Thinking is super uncool, and that's why you should do it. It's just like almost anything that's like cool anymore. Yeah, it just sucks. And I think that's like what the underground movement has always been about, is just like seeing what's in the mainstream, being like, it ain't there, and kind of like cobbling something together, you know? And yeah, it's a little mismatched, but that's like its beauty.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, where workers with earbuds can find genuine liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
We bring primary texts from leading lights of diverse fields to bear on topical issues and works popular in our current world. Theory Underground is a publishing house as well as lecture course and social media platform.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
Yes.
And
amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run a review of books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Jesus Christ.
Seriously.
This is a little experiment in what I, David McKerracher, can pull off without relying on the academy or the algorithmic dictates of the attention economy.
Usually, a good edited collection has good essays, but you only want to read a few. Every essay makes me want to read the other essays because you have a vision. Everyone that you invited for a reason. You weren't some fake publicist who's like, "Oh, so-and-so's a new book, have them on your show." No, you only talk to people because you've read shit by them, that you've thought about, that you think has value, even if you disagree. So I think that's what's amazing.
I believe that I am, like so many others, pioneering a future in which educators can form learning webs that will make learning as a way of life enjoyable and emancipatory. However, before these tools become accessible, they have to be experimented with. That's why I built my own website and app using nothing more than my own saved wages, 5 patrons, and some small classes of students over the last year. Of course, I also have had my wife Anne's moral support and help with accounting so that I don't get in trouble with the IRS or whatever. In less than a year, Theory Underground has already put out 8 courses, 2 books. One, my book, Timenergy, and the other, Underground Theory, which has over 30 contributors, including works written by students at Theory Underground, some of my fellow travelers, and colleagues in the broader universe of underground theory. Beyond the books and courses, though, you will also find interviews, reading exegetical reaction sessions, and live weekly events for working class autodidacts, independent researchers, and renegade academics. These include a variety of clubs and cohorts that meet on a weekly or monthly basis. If you want to get involved, there are 4 main subscription levels.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind.
The point is to make learning, practice, and theoretical comprehension a way of life. Support at this stage of the operation is more crucial than ever because my savings were used up over the last year of getting this established. If I can triple my subscribers in the next 2 months, I can quit my gig at Amazon and focus on this work full time. All I need is a few more people at each of the levels or a couple big time patrons who just want to see it happen. Right now I am doing a patron and site subscriber drive, so excuse the commercial. But if you end up really liking what goes on at this channel, consider signing up soon. If you cannot afford it, but want to get involved with some of the stuff behind the paywall, I have made a financial aid scholarship you can sign up for here in the description. Quick side note, some people ask about the profit motive. At this point, I have not actually made a return on any of my investment in terms of the amount of time, energy that I put into things, the amount of savings I've actually put into things, the opportunity cost of the work that I'm doing as opposed to the other kinds of things that I could be doing for money. But more importantly, I don't actually make enough to pay for my cost of living. The goal is to make enough for my cost of living. And then once that is achieved, everything over that amount is going to go towards expanding the operation to the point where I can hire Michael Downs, aka Mikey of The Dangerous Maybe, to be a full-time researcher and part-time teacher at Theory Underground. All right, so with that aside, I just want to say also, if you are a worker with earbuds, what's up? I see you. I work at Amazon part-time, and everything I do is for my past self who used to work there full-time. Most workers with earbuds couldn't care less about theory, but I do believe a working class intellectual revolution could grow out of the underground theory scene. My hope is that what I have built here will contribute to making the scene something more than just a scene, and you into something more than just a scene kid. We're trying to make this into a real intellectual milieu capable of leading a way forward beyond the imminent crises facing humanity. But for that, we need thinking now more than ever.
Start thinking.
I hope that you either will or have enjoyed the program, and also make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave this playing in the background all the time while you're doing other things.
Playing long-form Theory Underground content in the background while you do things has, in the near future, been scientifically proven to emancipate minds from the functional illiteracy imposed on workers by the structural stultification of time energy. This is achieved by reterritorializing circumspective concern.
Also, to some degree, it is for the algorithm.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind!
So,
Thinking is super uncool, and that's why you should do it. It's just like almost anything that's like cool anymore. It just sucks. And I think that's like what the underground movement has always been about, is just like seeing what's in the mainstream, being like it ain't there, and kind of like cobbling something together, you know? And yeah, it's a little mismatched, but that's like its beauty.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
welcome to Theory Underground, where workers with earbuds can find genuine liberation from necessity.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
We bring primary texts from leading lights of diverse fields to bear on topical issues and works popular in our current world. Theory Underground is a publishing house as well as lecture course and social media platform.
You've been reading Underground Theory.
Yes.
And
Amazing book. I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Jesus Christ.
This is a little experiment in what I, David McKerracher, can pull off without relying on the academy or the algorithmic dictates of the attention economy.
Usually a good edited collection has good essays, but you only want to read a few. Every essay makes me want to read the other essays because you have a vision. Everyone that you invited for a reason. You weren't some fake publicist. It's like, how's so-and-so's a new book? Have them on your show. No, you only talk to people because you've read shit by them that you've thought about, that you think has value, even if you disagree. So I think that's what's amazing.
I believe that I am, like so many others, pioneering a future in which educators can form learning webs that will make learning as a way of life enjoyable and emancipatory. However, before these tools become accessible, they have to be experimented with. That's why I built my own website and app using nothing more than my own saved wages, 5 patrons, and some small classes of students over the last year. Of course, I also have had my wife Anne's moral support and help with accounting so that I don't get in trouble with the IRS or whatever. In less than a year, Theory Underground has already put out 8 courses, 2 books. One, my book, Time Energy, And the other, Underground Theory, which has over 30 contributors, including works written by students at Theory Underground, some of my fellow travelers, and colleagues in the broader universe of underground theory. Beyond the books and courses, though, you will also find interviews, reading exegetical reaction sessions, and live weekly events for working class autodidacts, independent researchers, and renegade academics. These include a variety of clubs and cohorts that meet on a weekly or monthly basis. If you want to get involved, there are 4 main subscription levels.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind.
The point is to make learning, practice, and theoretical comprehension a way of life. Support at this stage of the operation is more crucial than ever because my savings were used up over the last year of getting this established. If I can triple my subscribers in the next 2 months, I can quit my gig at Amazon and focus on this work full time. All I need is a few more people at each of the levels or a couple big time patrons who just want to see it happen. Right now I am doing a patron and site subscriber drive, so excuse the commercial. But if you end up really liking what goes on at this channel, consider signing up soon. If you cannot afford it, but want to get involved with some of the stuff behind the paywall, I have made a financial aid scholarship you can sign up for here in the description. Quick side note, some people ask about the profit motive. At this point, I have not actually made a return on any of my investment in terms of the amount of time, energy that I put into things, the amount of savings I've actually put into things, the opportunity cost of the work that I'm doing as opposed to the other kinds of things that I could be doing for money. But more importantly, I don't actually make enough to pay for my cost of living. The goal is to make enough for my cost of living. And then once that is achieved, everything over that amount is going to go towards expanding the operation to the point where I can hire Michael Downs, aka Mikey of The Dangerous Maybe, to be a full-time researcher and part-time teacher at Theory Underground. All right, so with that aside, I just want to say also, if you are a worker with earbuds, what's up? I see you. I work at Amazon part-time and everything I do is for my past self who used to work there full-time. Most workers with earbuds couldn't care less about theory, but I do believe a working class intellectual revolution could grow out of the underground theory scene. My hope is that what I have built here will contribute to making the scene something more than just a scene, and you into something more than just a scene kid. We're trying to make this into a real intellectual milieu capable of leading a way forward beyond the imminent crises facing humanity. But for that, we need thinking now more than ever.
Start thinking.
I hope that you either will or have enjoyed the program, and also make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave this playing in the background all the time while you're doing other things.
Playing long-form Theory Underground content in the background while you do things has, in the near future, been scientifically proven to emancipate minds from the functional illiteracy imposed on workers by the structural stultification of time energy. This is achieved by reterritorializing circumspective concern.
Also, to some degree, it is for the algorithm.
Think of it like a gym membership, but for your mind!
Just want to make a quick shout out here at the end to my patrons over at Patreon. I set the Patreon up like a week and a half ago because the fact is not everybody wants to be a subscriber at my website. Not everybody wants to take courses at the website. And so people who are looking to support in some other way, Patreon is kind of a tried and true route, and some people really prefer it. And so to those who are becoming patrons at my Patreon, thank you so much. If I can get up to $500 per month between people over at my website and people over at the Patreon and people over at the Substack, collectively, I will be able to quit the job at Amazon and do this full time. And so to the people who just started trying to make that possible over at Patreon, special shout out to Alexander, Neil, Darian Large, and Nikolai. You guys are really helping make the difference. Really appreciate it. And to anybody who becomes a subscriber or a patron here in the next month, I just want to say you get a free copy of my new book, Timenergy, Why You Have No Time or Energy. And you really incentivized me to get the audio recording of this finished, which I've been working on. So thank you. Take care, everybody.